This is Andrew Smith, American Lit 2130. Very mini lecture on fans, fandoms, critics, and collectors. So, using the chat window, please somebody recognize the kind of fandom that is depicted in the slide. We see a very prominent fandom that is affixed to our local community. One of the great signatures or signs of this fandom, which I know somebody on the call recognizes and is going to write about in the chat. Maybe you've perhaps even been to the temple of this fandom. It's in a town just down the highway from us. What is the fandom that we see here? And we know this because of their attire. They're wearing a tribal wardrobe here. They've adorned themselves in face paint and the particular pants and necklaces and clothing, and they're waving the particular accoutrements of their fandom. So it's a community and a culture that is around sports fandom. Now, of course, we are in NFL. It's January, so it is the time when we are all shaking our heads at what happened yesterday. And we had an underdog, and we had a favorite, the home team and the losing team, and here it is. It's all happening now, right now, and in 2 weeks we'll have the Super Bowl. So that sports fandom is a big American fandom. Also, sports, baseball, basketball, car racing, soccer, or what the rest of the world call their football. It's all picking up steam. But fandoms also are in other cultures and subcultures. Perhaps you have seen or heard of Star Wars fandoms, Harry Potter fandoms, anime fandoms, card collecting fandoms, and collecting is a big deal. People collect action figures. People collect comic books. People collect stamps. People collect, American Girl dolls. People collect. Well, you collect so you can connect. Hopefully, at least ideally, that would be the reason and the rationale. Does anybody on the call know a collector or have an obsessive collection, or do you belong to a fandom? Does anybody belong to a subculture or a fandom? If you do, you can write to us about it in the chat right now. I'd appreciate learning about this. And so the reason why the class is going forward right now is because I belong to a fandom. I've belonged to a fandom my entire life, and I've integrated my fandom with my profession. And we're going to see and learn about a female author, contemporary author, who grew up with that fandom and then did that for her job. But from a website, a special website, it's Dust and Grooves, they took pictures of people who are part of the music collecting fandom, and maybe you have an uncle or a dad or a grandpa who has the proverbial man cave. I mean, I'm sure there's a feminized version of that. It's not only gendered, right? But there is that cult of the man cave. And what does he have in the man cave? Well, some guys have the record collection. Dustin Grooves is the group that put out the thing, and you can see also that he's got other things he's collecting here. If you look around the room, you see the turntable. We see stuffed animals. We see action figures. We see typewriters. We see poster art. I see a didgeridoo. This man, a sewing machine. This man, and you can just see how much he loves, surrounding himself in this collectible context, right? And so those of you who have at least been exposed to this culture, and I see a couple of people talking in the chat, you're gonna be able to fold into this a little bit more because of your exposure to this. At least you'll at least be able to grasp and understand. And we're living at that moment right now where people are getting into the older physical products, right? And I'm just going to review again for you, just in case you don't remember, in case I forgot to tell you completely, the evolution of the product and the process of the music fandom, which begins with the 78, which you just saw the image of. It begins with the shellac. Then they move to vinyl, and you have the 45, which is called a single. And on the 45, you have two songs. You have the A side and the B side. And then in the 60s and the 70s, it blew up into the vinyl revolution and the long player. LP stands for long player, the 33. And you usually have about 30 to 40 minutes worth of music on an LP. And you would have two sides. Sometimes you would have a double LP. Sometimes you have a studio album, a live album. Sometimes you have a gatefold, which would be a double album. Oftentimes it opens up and people like buying them because of the large artwork. And you would have liner notes, which is writing about what you're listening to. And you could sit there while you're listening to it, reading the liner notes. And in fact, one way to describe the annotated mixtape project that you guys will be doing at the end is it's part fanzine, which is what William Miller, aka Cameron Crowe, was into when he said he writes for an underground paper. Lester Bangs edited a fanzine that became a professional magazine called Cream Magazine out of my hometown of Detroit, Michigan. But the liner notes that you would see people would write like a little essay on the back of an album describing what the album that you're listening to. You could read that while you were listening to it. Your annotated a mixtape has the liner notes aspect of it molded and merged with the fanzine aspect. But the people are spending a lot of time in their cars, and the need for convenience and the need for a bargain, because the large demographic is working class people, teenagers who have a limited income. The 8-track cassette tape revolution happens in the 70s and the 80s, and we move into cassettes, become really huge. Cassettes, by the way, are making a huge resurgence right now. I'm starting to get back more into cassettes and vinyl. I own a couple of 78s. I brought them to class, and I'm running out of time, but I just want to show you. I don't really know what to do with these because I don't really have a proper device, but I have a friend in town who has an old hand crank Victrola, but it was just exciting to find them and to put my hands on them and just to know that they exist. I've got a Bessie Smith, and I do have a record player. Here's an OK. The label here, it comes in the in the sleeve, 35 cents, like I showed you on the slide. I do have a friend who's got a hand crank machine on which we can play these. Maybe he and I will dust it off eventually and bring it out. When COVID finally subsides again, hopefully it will subside. I'll bring that out and share that with people. And then we went to the CD, and the CD revolution was the 90s after the vinyl revolution in the 60s and 70s, the cassette revolution in the 80s, the vinyl revolution and the CD revolution in the 90s, which slowly gave over to the MP3 revolution, the iPad, MP3 player, now computers, smart speakers, streaming services such as Apple, Amazon, and Spotify. And now, at least in the people I run with on social media, we're reevaluating streaming. People are looking hard at that model. I've been reading a lot of very strongly worded opinions the last couple of days about streaming services. For a while, one of those major services had become kind of like the public library, the public jukebox around which we all gathered, but that seems to have now dispersed, and people are spreading out across multiple streaming platforms. That complicates our assignment a little bit. I'll say more about that at a later time. So Amanda Petrusich has written 3 major books. She wrote a 33 and a third book about a British artist called Nick Drake, and that's the model. One of the models for our big album project that we're doing this semester is the 33 and a third series. She wrote It Still Moves, and I went out and finally bought the physical books. And this is a road trip she took. The Lost Songs, Lost Highways, and the Search for the Next American Music. I've done the similar road trips to what she's done and made them music oriented. So I really, really loved and identified with this book. But the book that just blows my mind absolutely is Do Not Sell at Any Price. And I'm going to share a little bit out of that book with you all here in just a moment as time allows. And I'm going to stop my my presentation, but what I just love, I'm going to give a little bit of her. I'll let you guys meet her via a video. Deeply respect of her is she grew up in a much younger generation. She definitely grew up in the CD and MP3 generation. She gravitated to the old stuff, and she made a huge name for herself in an industry that is massively dominated by dudes. And she's a real visionary. And she lives in the Catskills in New York. She still works. She writes for New Yorker magazine and many other websites and journals. I believe she's done some of what I'm doing here, being a professor of writing as well. But this book, The Wild Obsessive Hunt for the World's Rarest 78 RPM Records, really dovetails into The White Tears, and I probably should have assigned it. Somebody who wants to can go get it on their Kindle and just devour it as I did. It's an amazing and incredible book, and she's an amazing and incredible writer who I think provides a great model for us for how this is done. Like, we do this like in the real world. People are made their livelihoods. This isn't just a wild errand that I've